has just appeared now. Brilliant, great to see you all here. I was hoping that I might be able to kick off with a bit of a warm-up question. Dan, if it's all right, I might throw to you first and then maybe to Indra and Dima to round it out. Question being, is there a particular milestone, either a recent one or an upcoming one for your startup that has you particularly excited that you'd be able to tell us about to kick off?
Yeah, sure. Just one. I guess we've recently started. We've kicked off our first major pilot with a US utility. So it's I guess starting our international expansion. As you know, we're Australian based. We've probably mapped out about half the Australian infrastructure assets from a sort of electrical utility perspective. So fairly well. I guess that's another milestone here, I suppose.
Yeah, well, that sounds big. Well done. How about Indra from Overstory's point of view?
Yeah, no, it's been a great summer for Overstory as well. We've welcomed 5 new team members across engineering and business, and also on the business side. In the last month, we've onboarded 3 new utility customers, all in the US. So really excited about growing our footprint further.
Oh, well done. That sounds like some great traction. Very impressive. And how about Dima, from VLab's point of view, any particular milestones that you're keen to share?
Well, there are several. There are multiple milestones actually. One of them is a very large field test that we're currently exploring with the German railways, the Deutsche Bahn. That will be very large, I would say, field test. Otherwise, we're currently with a large Australian customer in discussions for another pilot. So those are very interesting for us milestones to further explore. And I think those are the most important ones at this point. It's really like sales, and so if you're interested, don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah, no, totally. Well done again. And I mean, there's a theme to all of those, isn't there? There's a definite revenue flavor, which is completely reasonable. So well done. Having asked you that question, could I move to a market focus, I suppose, being a discussion about digital visualization? I'd be keen to chat a bit about your perspectives on the market for digital visualization technologies at the moment. So specifically, what's going on in the technology ecosystem and in your target markets in particular that makes now a good time to be scaling a digital visualization business? What are the key factors at play? Maybe Indra, would you like to kick off?
Yeah, sure. I think from the market demand side, I think we see a strong pull from utilities across the whole world because of all these forest fires and bushfires. They're really pushing utilities to move forward to more risk-based vegetation management. And I think digitalization is an important aspect of that. How do they make sure they have a holistic view of what are current risks, but also what are future risks? So there's a strong interest from utilities to move forward. And I think the technology that we have now today, with more and more satellites being launched, advancements in machine learning, make it possible now to also provide them the insights they need with a high enough accuracy, which wasn't possible, I think, a few years before, because every tree counts for a utility. It's often that single tree that touches the line and then causes a massive fire. So making it very actionable for these customers. So not showing them 1 million trees, but making sure they can actually move towards more risk-based vegetation management in a digital way. I think that is where we see a strong request from our customers and potential utilities as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it strikes me from an almost academic point of view, a couple of the terms that I've come very used to using in the startup sphere that I'm now in are like commercial readiness and technology readiness. And it sort of sounds like what you're talking about there is a combination of the two, that suddenly the satellites and things are there for the technology side of things, but so is the demand, because suddenly the utilities realize the commercial drive that they've got to get that sort of information. So thank you. Dima, may I throw to you next?
So also from our side, we see there is a very strong interest in further digitizing the construction industry. Generally, the construction industry has been one of the most conservative industries in terms of digitalization and things like that. So we see that they're lagging in general with respect to other industries. So at this point, there's a strong interest from from construction industries to further improve their digital environment, especially in the field. And so we see also that, and that's a little bit with respect to what Indra was saying earlier, we see that the technologies are becoming more and more available for further digitizing these the field work. So it can be done through phones, tablets, and nowadays also through those headsets, through augmented reality, which allows you to really create important, I would say, operational efficiencies or improve operational efficiencies in that sector. And that's where we see, from our point of view at least, a lot of development.
Yeah, it's interesting that I guess the more founders in this space that I talk to, the more aspects of digitizing the construction industry I become aware of. It's not actually just about making what I am used to seeing as printed out plans. It's not actually just a case of translating those onto a computer screen. There's a lot of other technologies that can go into it, which I suspect is a comment that probably strikes home for you too, Dan, in terms of digital twins. So yes, any comments on your side from the market conditions that are making this a good time to expand and scale up?
Well, I think there's been a lot of talk for many years. I think it's become the case that both the internal momentum, because we're talking in many cases with utilities, large enterprises, there's lots of moving parts. So the technology has come up to a level now, the will to actually do things has sort of reached a breaking point where things really need to happen. And so there's a lot of a confluence of all these factors. I think, for us, one of the major things that gets our customers interested in is also, it's not just visualization though. It's, there is a certain element of, a large element of, you need to actually drive ROI. And so visualization is important for comprehension, for collaboration, and those things are actually important. But now with the level that technology's reached, it's possible to perform more advanced analysis at larger scale, that sort of thing. And so it's just all these things coming together at the same time. So that's why I think it's kind of like really good timing now.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And if I may keep you talking for a bit, I have spent a little bit of time in the civil engineering industry, studied civil engineering to begin with, have obviously deviated somewhat since then. But during that time, had some exposure to building information modeling and digital twins. And I must admit, the context always seemed to be that we were modeling one individual piece of infrastructure. My impression of Neara's approach is that it's much more holistic, much more integrated, in that you actually model entire infrastructure systems. So could I ask you to talk us through how you do that? How do you build models with that level of sophistication, and then you're able to apply them in contexts which presumably vary quite a lot? To what extent can you really make this a cookie cutter approach?
Okay. Yep. So I'll take each of those. So I think one of the key distinctions with what you might have experienced, I guess, is we're not usually dealing with a situation where we have detailed floor plans or something like that. We're dealing with large, semi-organized or semi-organic amorphous kind of situations, right? There's assets that have been built at various times with various degrees of record keeping or not much at all. Then there's lots of different types of data that's available in a patchwork fashion. And it's all kind of, there's different types of raw data. And so being able to take that and then synthesize it all together and produce an accurate model is sort of like one side of the coin, I suppose. The other side of it is also the interdependency, especially when we're talking about linear assets. It's not just about an individual object, it's about how they all interact with each other. There are many use cases where, we're talking about maybe dynamic line rating or cascading failures or that kind of thing where they can affect each other. And then there's the other overlay, there's the surrounding environment, vegetation, terrain, weather, all that kind of stuff. So So that I think that is where it's probably quite different to, I guess, what you're alluding to before. The other the other thing for us is, I guess, coming at it from a engineering / physics point of view, is it kind of it allows us to do a number of different use cases that might be seemingly unrelated, but they'll stem from the same. To solve them, we can leverage the underlying capabilities from once you've got an accurately digitized model, you can do things ranging from vegetation structural analysis, or whatever, asset replacement, optimization, degradation, all that kind of stuff comes from that. I'm not sure if that is as applicable to your civil engineering experience there. There might be many use cases in those regards, but that's sort of our take on it, is to produce a general platform that can solve these different things with a toolkit of physics, engineering, digitization, machine learning, domain modeling sort of techniques. Now that brings us a question of you said cookie cutter. It's rarely cookie cutter with in this industry. Like there are, so you could say physics is the same, which is true, and there's many similar problems, but every customer is unique. And so that's where, I guess, the domain modeling aspect that I alluded to is imperative in order to actually be able to produce a turnkey solution quickly for a customer, or allow customers to do it in a self-service fashion. Yep. I can elaborate, but I don't want to take up too much time on
No, thank you. I asked you a multifaceted question, so I appreciate the detail that you provided. Indra, may I ask you probably a similarly specific question? I was wandering around on your website and found that the Overstory platform is able to identify and advise utilities of insect infestations within the vegetation that they've got in their utility corridors, which I found quite astonishing because it's just so specific. So I was wondering if you could talk us through how Overstory's technology enables you to generate insights of the state of vegetation at such a fine level of detail.
Yeah, I think sick and unhealthy trees are a huge problem for our utility customers, because often it's not the tree next to the power line, but a bit further away that gets sick or unhealthy with the next wind blows onto the line. So that has been a huge problem for most utilities we work with. So that's why we doubled down on that. Worked a lot with forestry companies, NGOs as well, to get this right. And I think the beauty of satellite imagery is the diversity and the scalability of the data. So with satellites, we don't only have visible light, but also near infrared and red edge bands that tells a lot about the status of vegetation. So we're extracting that information over time following the vegetative period, so we can see if a tree is stressed. So basically, we're looking for outliers, trees that are behaving differently from other trees. And with this very high resolution satellite imagery, we can really see on tree level. And thanks to that near infrared, we can see if a tree is more stressed before we can actually see it on the human eye. So before we see that a tree turns brown, it already shows with the near infrared how productive a tree is. And that really helps to find those outliers in the forest.
Yeah, right. So does that mean there's a temporal element to it? Are you're sort of tracking the state of this vegetation over time, and it's those changes that alert you to potential risk factors?
Exactly. It's a combination of the resolution, of the temporal resolution, and then of those different bands that tells a lot about the vegetation. Yeah,
right. Well, thank you for, to be honest, completely justifying my amazement at the capability of your technology. And Dima, I have a question for you, which I think we may have touched on last time I spoke to you, and it's kind of to do with the human aspect of augmented reality technology and its adoption, because I'd imagine that introducing it into a company like a utility is a bit of a paradigm shift, in that it's asking the people within those companies to start trusting computer-generated imagery and analysis that they're presumably very accustomed to doing by hand, or at least direct interaction with a computer interface that they might not have with this new technology that VLADS is developing. So can you tell us a bit about how you've brought the people along with you on this journey such that they're actually able to accept and adopt the technology?
That's a very good question. Thank you. So what we generally do is we develop a pilot project first, right, with really the people in the field. They need to work with the type of technology, right? So they need to feel comfortable wearing a headset with with glasses in front of their eyes, etc. And what we see generally is that so we've integrated things like voice commands and stuff like that. So it's really, really easy and intuitive to use. It takes you 5 minutes to get used to it, right, with the technology. That's one thing, and it's not only the young people; it's also the older people that are working in the field. They quite comfortable wearing a headset, first of all, because they're used to wearing a helmet and things like that in the field. And then having a set of glasses in front of your eyes, it's not really disturbing generally. So by applying some techniques such as voice commands, it's really easy to use the technology. But in the end, it's really important to bring them along during this pilot phase or potential demo to see if they're comfortable and trying to make it as intuitive as possible. So that's really a key aspect. Also making it really rugged, right? As you're used to your phone, right? So people generally, younger people grew up with their phones, so that there's a certain pattern or structure in terms of software development and UI and things like that. So we try to keep it as simple as possible to use, because what we try to avoid is that people need to sort of interact, with this digital information. It just needs to be there and needs to help them and make life easier and simpler, and not complicate or overcomplicate things. So those are things that we focus on that are really important and that we try to improve as much as we can over time. So people actually like to wear it in the field. So that's our general approach to this type of technologies.
Yeah, no, thank you. That makes a lot of sense. It's amazing how many things can really be brought down to that adage of keep it simple, stupid, right? Just keep it simple and everything is made much more easy to follow. I was also interested to hear you talk at the beginning about the pilot, and I guess I was thinking there's probably an element there of almost socializing the technology and the behavior that sits around it so that people become comfortable with it. They see other people doing it and it just doesn't feel so foreign eventually. So thank you very much for that. I might take the opportunity just to say to our audience members quickly, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask our three panelists for the remaining 10 minutes or so that we've got, feel free to put them in the chat. In the meantime, though, I would quite like to chat a bit about how you've found your experience so far, both in our program and outside of it, engaging with utilities. Because at the beginning, when we mentioned those milestones, I heard the word utility and customers in the same sentence quite a few times. So in the first instance, may I ask each of you, perhaps for the sake of choosing an order, we might go Dima, Dan, Indra, to give you some certainty around what's going to happen. Could I ask you to tell me, please, feel free to make this a sales pitch essentially, what is the value proposition of your technology for a utility company specifically? How is it superior to the engineering and the operations technologies that they might have used previously? Over to you, Dima.
Thank you very much. So the value proposition from our side is that we help surveyors to really improve or simplify their work in the field. And that is generally for utilities, if they have their own surveying team or operations team. It makes them save in the end, makes them save operational costs. The second part is that utilities generally work with contractors. So by sort of working with contractors, they use our technology, they can improve their data accuracy, data quality, again, outsource some surveying work to contractors that are already in the field. And again, saving operational costs, improving data quality, and potentially avoid damages during excavation work, because you can see exactly where everything is located, so you know where to avoid excavation work. So that's generally what we our value proposition for utilities.
Yeah, thank you. I promise not to take up too much time talking about the civil engineering that I didn't do, but I must admit, hearing you say that, my first thought was just early works. I'm not sure whether that's a term you're familiar with, but the number of times I've seen trenches dug to find power lines that aren't there. Your technology, I think, has a lot to offer in those situations. Now, who did I say was next? Indra? I can't remember, sorry.
No, that's fine. Yeah, so utilities, they spend millions, some even billions per year on vegetation management alone. Also, smaller utilities spend millions per year. It's often their largest line item on their operational spend. They fly helicopters, drones, or actually most of the time they walk the lines. It takes them several years to scan their entire territory only once. And with our satellite-based technology, we can scan their entire grid every day. So really adding another layer of holistic information around vegetation-related risk, so they can actually optimize their spend and reduce risk of vegetation. So really helping them to move from fixed trimming cycles to more risk-based trimming cycles.
Yeah, right. That is an amazing reduction in time, commitment, and associated cost. And Dan, Neara's value proposition for utilities.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's so I think it comes down to the fidelity of the models that they have available, right? So traditional methods, depending on the use case, are valid in their own right, but they're time consuming and laborious. So it's pretty much about taking the same understanding that you might have done manually in the past and just being able to level it up and automate it and apply it at scale and do. So that's if I were to summarize it.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you. Now, may I spin the wheel the other way? So again, I'll keep Dan talking, go to Indra and then to Dima. And off the back of that, can I ask, as founders, how have you found the experience engaging with utilities as a customer? Have they been responsive to the technology? Do they provide feedback that you're then able to incorporate into your iterations and product development? And then part two of the question, on the off chance that we've got some startup founders listening who might be interested in establishing partnerships with founders with utilities down the track, have you got any advice for them as to how to go about it?
Sure. I mean, I've found it personally very enjoyable, but basically, fundamentally, the collaboration with our customers is what ultimately drives the use cases that we support. They are the domain experts in their respective areas, so it's a dynamic that's worked well for us. It's worked well for them, and as a result of that, they have a platform where there's core capability out of the box now, but they can still tune it to their unique circumstances, and they have the freedom to do that. So that's been very good. I think the joint product roadmap journey with our customers has enabled us to achieve a strong product market fit as a result. In terms of advice to other startups, I think I would say a couple of things. Focus on identifying the biggest issues and problems you're trying to solve and why you're looking to solve it. Like, is it because of regulatory drivers? Is it investment driven? Is it safety driven? Cost optimization, that kind of stuff. And then match those issues and problems to where you have the greatest ability to solve them, such that it creates the most value for the customer. So if you can apply a tangible ROI metric to the value creation, that's critical. The other one I would say is, given the relatively long sales cycles that typically accompany utility engagement, it can be useful to focus on low-hanging fruit pilot opportunities so that the active engagement can begin as soon as possible. And then you can, expand your offering within the customer. It's easier said than done, because sometimes a lot of the effort is in the initial kind of setup, but the more you can try and slice the problem in a way that's doable in a pilot is the better, I guess.
Yep, very good point, both from the point of view of keeping the scope of the problem tackleable and from a business point of view of dealing with those long sales cycles. Indra, how about you? How's your experience with utilities been?
Yeah, no, I would definitely second what Daniel just said. Showing value early is important for them to move fast, I think. And try to, because utilities, I mean, they are known to be very risk averse and sometimes slow, but I think trying to solve a real problem for them, so listening to them and trying to solve a real problem, can really help to land those deals and expand from there, because I do agree it's important to land and then expand from there, doing more work for them. But what we've seen by being such focused on that vegetation part, we've signed deals within 1 month of first contact with a utility. It's often multi-year deals, 6 figures. So it is possible. I think having a very clear focus and a clear value prop that solves their needs, I think that really helps to move faster with them. So I think it is possible if you have a clear value prop, but that means really listening to the customer, providing value, and then go from there. Because I think if you've told me like a few years ago, utilities would be your main customers, I think I would have told myself that I was crazy. But we're really, I think what Daniel also said, we're really enjoying working with these utilities because we're solving a real problem, and that excites us as well. And we're learning together with them as well. So we learn about new issues in new geographical areas, specific tree species that can fall down with certain winds. And I think all those learnings excite us as well to continue develop our roadmap.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. I think I might need to ask you for permission to steal a catchphrase, actually, that you may have just provided with me, provided for me, and that is land, then expand. I love it. Okay, so Dima, your experience with utilities and any advice you've got for startups?
I think it's important to mention that I come from the utility industry. So I've worked for 10 years at utilities. So I know what it is to be at a utility and on the other side, on the startup side. So coming from utility myself, I know that the industry can be rather slow. It doesn't mean that there are no very important problems to solve, as Daniel and Indra already mentioned. And since generally utilities, they transport a lot of energy, gas, well, they have a very important role in society. There's a lot of investments going on, and all those investment strategies and risk that they run in terms of forest fires, as Indra is mentioning, are very real problems to solve, to keep the cost for customers as low as possible, right? In terms of energy transition, things like that. So the utility industry is very interesting, yet it's a bit slow. Also, their assets are very, they have a lifespan of say 100 years. So sometimes it's difficult to add technologies, like fast moving technologies into that field, because they have, they're working over a lifespan or doing risk analysis over 100 years. So to now, from the startup point of view, from my side, so at first it was a bit difficult because we have a very new technology. We're working with a very new technology, and so that needs to adopt to those utilities. So again, to reiterate on what Indra and Dan are saying, is just you first try to land a few customers on which you can really trial your product and adapt it to their needs, so that you have a good product market fit. And once you have that, it's very pleasant to work with utilities, because in general, I would say globally, they all work where they have a very similar way of working. They're generally not competitors. So if you have working with one, you can work with the others as well. They even work in groups all together, right? Sort of, how do you say that? They share information. So on a high level. So there's no, so once you have a product that works really well for the utility, it's rather easy to expand, I would say. So for me, it's been an absolute pleasure to work with utilities, and once your product is easy to buy, as for example with the EnergyLab program, it took us 6 to 12 months to get to the next customer. However, during the EnergyLab program, within a month we had a deal. So it means also that our product is getting at that point that it's just easy, an off-the-shelf product. They can buy it, they can use it, and once you're at that point, that stage, it's really a pleasure to work with utilities. Absolutely.
Oh, good. Well, thank you very much. Of course, I'm thrilled to hear that through the program you've been able to achieve such a consolidated and accelerated path to engagement with the utility there. And I think one of my key takeaways probably from what you were just talking about was the importance of product market fit, which has definitely been a theme across the responses that you've all given. And I'm aware now that that brings us to time. So thank you so much to you all, Dan, Dima, and Indra, for your insights there. It was a really interesting discussion. I clearly learned a lot, and I really appreciate that. Thank you to everyone who joined us in the audience. It's been great to have you here. And a big thanks also to Transgrid and Endeavour Energy for their support of the Scaleup program this year. I'm sure I speak on behalf of all of us when I say please feel free to use those links in the chat to learn a bit more about each of the startups here and also what EnergyLab does. And that we'd be delighted if you wanted to sign up for newsletters on our respective websites. And with that, I think I'd better leave you to your afternoon. So thank you for your company and your time. And we look forward to seeing you at another event soon.